So very late evening to our friends from Australia, and I don't think we have any more New Zealander, with us. Good afternoon for our friends in the Middle East. Good afternoon to our friends in Europe. Good morning to the East Coast, and very good morning to the West Coast. We are almost, halfway, and we had very interesting talks this morning with ministers, with different panelists, talking about all the aspects. And now we're touching on one very important question is, what will be the future of aquaculture when we talk about seaweed? What type of aquaculture? And to run this panel, we have a beautiful, gathering of experts from different places, from the north, from the south, from all over the world for Houssam. And Houssam will do the introduction. Houssam is one of the top experts at the FAO in terms of seaweed industry. He is supporting a lot of projects in Africa, in Middle East, and all over the world. And I have a new project for you in Australia, Houssam, that I need to mention. And so I'm going to give you the floor. Take your time. We want to listen carefully to what you see as a perspective for the future of aquaculture. And then after we do the round the clock, panel to make introductions, and we jump into the conversation. Is that okay?
That's all right for me.
The floor is yours. And just before, if you can put your mic on mute so we can avoid, the clinking keyboards things. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Pierre. Thanks to BioMarine for inviting for this invitation, and really the honors of opening such a meaningful session that asks fundamental question: where to cultivate seaweed, inland, inshore, or it's in offshore. But before we get really to that question, we have really fantastic panelists that we will give them the floor later on. Let's try to answer some other question so that the picture as complete as possible, to make it more clear for all of you. So starting by the first one, why now? Why now we have seaweed? Why we are speaking about seaweed today? So in recent years, we have seen the emergence of a good number of initiatives around seaweed all over the world, in the 5 continents and in a different context, ranging from food to medical, industrial, etc. Furthermore, seaweed are really an important element of major initiative, starting with FAO. I'm a FAO officer, so I will start with FAO. And as farmed blue food, they will play really an important role in the blue transformation initiative. So please underline this new concept that FAO is launching, the blue transformation. So, and really this is the new tool for FAO in 2020, or new vision, in order to reach sustainable aquaculture. Also for European Union, as an important source of alternative protein for sustainable food system and global food security, seaweed constitute really a pillar of European Union farm to fork strategy. And it's really at the heart of the European Green Deal. And finally, seaweed cultivation can contribute toward achievement of several targets of United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. So the surge of seaweed on the public scene is natural, thanks to the scientific, technological progress, which has enabled the species to position themselves in the 2nd place in terms of world aquaculture production volume. The latest FAO data, for example, indicate that the world seaweed cultivation production tonnage increases 1,000 times, from 34.7 thousand tons in 1950 to 35.7 million tons in 2019. So my second question will be, are there other factors that have given seaweed this reputation? So the answer is, of course, positive. Seaweed distinguish themselves from other aquaculture species by several advantages. First, they are a species that do not require direct feeding when farmed. Also, they can be produced in a different scale, from family SMEs to industrial companies. Third, seaweed cultivation know-how is essential, but its mastery does not require a great technological intervention, except, of course, for more industrial scale or in specific environments like offshore. Also, seaweed has a wide range of application, from direct consumption to biotechnological uses. So the creation also of the employment is very important for seaweed, because if we compare it to other aquaculture sector, it's really very diverse, because in seaweed, you start from production and you have different layers to reach the transformation, the final also consumer. And we should also keep in mind that seaweed are providing ecosystem services, and is highly important. So this brings us back to another equally important question. Are seaweeds miraculous species? So absolutely not. Like every living species, seaweed need a set of factors in order to express the best of their growth and potential, including a healthy and balanced environment, which is in turn mean a strong and resilient aquaculture industry. Some believe that seaweeds are a sign of polluted environment. Well, not. Seaweed really have this quality to reflect the quality of the environment in which they live. They can certainly grow in an environment impacted from human activities and achieve a quantitative goals in terms of weight. But they will also carry the footprint of their environment. Heavy metal, for example. So we need a healthy environment to have a healthy seafood, and it's also a point that I want you to really underline. Governance in favor of development of the sector is also important. We need a clear regulatory framework that promote and encourage the implementation of seaweed cultivation through a fast track, maybe due to the provision of ecosystem services of seaweed, but also previously identified site, allocated zones for aquaculture for seaweed, which were determined the cultivation seaweed if possible and under what condition. So spatial planning is even more important in this dimension of governance, as it can highlight the complementarity between aquaculture activity. Let's imagine an integrated multi-trophic aquaculture at a scale that goes beyond the farm as unit and covers several production units: fish, shellfish, seaweed. So we don't need really to think at farm level, but at local level, the national level. And here we need a really strong governance tools. On the contrary, inadequate governance will push back investment initiative and reduce the expansion of the sector. So the seaweed market also is very important, is a factor in which condition will really support the expansion of the seaweed culture. There is an increasing in demand, we agree, for a number of seaweed-derived products, but requirements are becoming more restrictive in order for companies, especially, to operate competitively. This market will have to encourage responsible practices. And allow me, in the presence of Pierre, fervent defender of the principle of social sustainability, to emphasize that to stress that the market as well as the investor must equip themselves with the tools which make it possible to encourage activities in favor of sustainability, and particularly those related to positive societal impact. Then innovation also is a key factor for the success of the activities, which is even more critical in this sector than other, compared to sea bass and sea bream, for example, from Mediterranean, as GFCM is covering Mediterranean Black Sea. Because seaweed applications are very important and very diverse. Seaweed farming refers to many species and to even more product. But seaweed species are not, as I told you, miraculous, to come back to the question. And it's up to the decision makers to create a favorable regulatory framework and to allocate a healthy space for entrepreneurs. And it's also up to investors to believe in the principle of sustainable investment. It's up to all of us consumers to encourage products that come from responsible and trusted certified sources that promote the development of sustainable aquaculture. Another question which creates controversy and which we will have to consider, is seaweed cultivation only beneficial? Can it have negative impact? Are these farmed seaweed subject to pathology? So this is more or less some questions that people sometimes ask me. So the answer is quite easy. All living species are subject to pathologies if they are found in particular stressful condition. Each aquaculture activity must therefore promote the well-being of the farmed organism, either animal or plant, in order to have a product of quality and mitigate the biosecurity and pathology risks and harvest losses. Several species are very interesting, but the latest FAO figures are really precise. Why I want to share with you some data, because I think it's very important for the future if we really plan to develop this sector. The world seaweed cultivation, for example, increased from 4.2 million in 1990 to 4.7 million, as I told you, in 2019. So this growth was contributed mainly by bronze seaweed, then by red seaweed. However, green seaweed cultivation declined from 31,000 to 17,000. So in the GFCM area of intervention, as I'm belonging to the General Fisheries Commission for Mediterranean, our area of intervention is Mediterranean Black Sea. We strongly believe in the potential of seaweed culture. Still, our vision concerns indigenous species. So therefore, we will soon discuss how to develop this sector with our member country while preserving our ecosystem and strengthening aquaculture social acceptability and ecosystem services. Another point that I want to raise before giving the floor to our panelists and to Pierre is regarding the reforestation of our planet. It's really a necessity well understood in land, but not yet at sea. Fortunately, there is many initiatives aimed at reforesting. I can give you some, for example, Climate Action Plan in Ireland. India is the champion with 50 million trees planted in 24 hours. China also with the Grain for Green, and the green also, the Great Green Wall initiative in Africa. And last but not least, another new initiative, a very important, the Green Saudi Initiative, the Green Middle East initiative announced by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So all these initiatives could be replicated at sea. So we need to keep it in mind. And seaweed are an excellent candidate, especially for countries like ours, for example, for the GFCM area of competence in Mediterranean and in Middle East, where we have a low rain average. So from this forum, we would like to encourage our member state to include also seaweed in their plan for reforestation, because we can do it also at sea. And the green economy plan could include also not only the forest, but also seaweed. So we can keep it in our mind and discuss it. So I think I respected, Pierre, the 10 minutes.
Thank you so much.
Allocated.
We will come back to you. We will come back to you because you raise important points, and we're going to discuss this point during the conversation. So now I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself, and at the same time to explain why seaweed is important for your country. Haydar, you go first. Haydar, you're on mute. You have to restart.
Yeah, we will. Thank you very much, Pierre. Very exciting sessions and subject, by the way. We will talk further. Thank you, Mr. Houssam. My name is Haydar H. Sahtout. I have been in this field for the last probably 30 years, and I have been watching how seaweed is getting really the momentum. Really, I mean. 30 years ago, you talk to whom about seaweeds? Look at the situation today. So my personal and at the same time, the circle that I am associated with, is very much into industrial seaweed production for industrial applications. And we will be talking about this. We have a national fishery development program where seaweeds is part of that, and at the same time associated with, let's say, mega plans to go into industrial seaweed cultivation and processing. We'll talk later about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Haydar. CK, you are the Indian icon for seaweed. You refer that Mr. Seaweed in India. So tell us more about you and why is it so important for your country?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to present in this very important forum. I have been working on marine algae for more than 30 years, and the maximum time I spent in R&D in national lab. And after that, I moved to now in a private organization where I'm working as a CEO at the Indian Center for Climate and Societal Impacts Research. So our prime goal is to, how do we reverse the climate change? At the same time, how do we improve the livelihood of the coastal people? So that is the goal with which we are working. And to really achieve that goal, we need to develop cultivation technologies. And the technologies what we develop should be tested by us and proven by us. Then we would like to take forward this one to the coastal communities and replicate all over the country to make seaweed cultivation happen in such a way that we will be able to remove or absorb sizable amount of carbon dioxide. So regarding why this seaweed important to India, unlike many countries in the world, India has, I think, a pressing reason to explore the seas for its future food and energy and other chemical security. So we have more than 7,500 kilometers of coastline, and also the exclusive economic zone, which is more than 2 million square kilometers, which is equal to the 70% of the main. Despite having a luxuriant growth of seaweeds with all economically important potentials, so we are not able to really, I think, benefit from the resources what nature has given. So we are very focused, and we would like, how do we derive value and how do we realize value from the seaweeds that the country got? So we'll discuss in later in detail about the other issues. So I leave it here at this point of time.
Thank you, CK. So Esben, I refer to you as the next generation. So when did you start thinking, dreaming, and living with seaweed? And what type of seaweed? And why is it so important for Denmark?
Oh, I've dreamt of seaweed and thought about nothing but seaweed for the last 4 or 5 years. So I am the founder and CEO of Pure Algae, and we turn emissions into revenue streams. So for us, seaweed is very important because seaweed is the agent that can turn nutrient from seawater into a valuable biomass. And that is something that we use in the aquaculture sector, in this IMTA system, or more specific for RAS setups. And in Denmark, there is a high demand on seaweed, but there is a lack of the opportunity to get the seaweed. And we are trying to figure out a cost-efficient opportunity to produce and provide the seaweed for the better of the environment and for human health.
Thank you, Esben. So the first question, and let me think who we start, to answer this, is about the value chain. We discussed, during the day about the integration of the value chain, and it is very important, for a country to capitalize on getting, high in the value chain to allow some of the byproduct, to become also a reality. So I would say that I totally understand that vegetable protein is a natural ingredient in India because most of the people, they are used to eat vegetable protein. But why should we consider seaweed aquaculture for trying to feed the rest of the world? And maybe the question is addressed, to Houssam, who is in charge of saving, the world and against, hunger.
Thank you very much, dear Pierre. To be honest, seaweed are really a good solution for countries to feed their people, because even if some country really don't have a really orientation to culture seaweed, they should carefully analyze this possibility, this opportunity that they have, because is quite cheap. It don't need really an intervention, a huge human intervention. Also, they can create jobs in not only jobs for production, but also for transformation. It's not, we are not thinking on seaweed like, you know, for poor countries. No, seaweeds could be for all the countries, from production here and there. I mean, you cannot say, okay, we will produce seaweeds in Africa and then make the transformation of valorization in Europe. No, you can have even at local level in Africa, or the same in Europe, a unit for the production and also the transformation of seaweed. And you can feed your people with the seaweed. You can really start to improve the social acceptability of seaweed in your community and for your people, and start really to replace some ingredient with, for example, I'm Tunisian, and I'm sure that we can make a couscous, you know, one of you, couscous with seaweed. It could be possible, and I think it's the same in many countries. So seaweed are really a good deal for our countries to invest, to really to develop also some research on it, starting always with local species. We encourage the use of local species, at least for our region, Mediterranean and Black Sea.
Thank you, Sam. Haydar, the last time we talked, I was stunned by the potential of seaweed in Saudi, and you mentioned the green belt, Sam, but Haydar mentioned that there is much more than a green belt. There is a green reef, that we can build around, the peninsula of Saudi. So, Haydar, why is it so important for the kingdom, to grow seaweed, and for which, I would say, outcome markets?
Thank you, Pierre. Okay, I would like to go out of the, let's say, traditional circle of the seaweeds. We think about the future. Seaweed, the world production, as Houssam just said, 35 million tons, where probably the capacity of our oceans, trillions of tons. Why we are not producing? It's the smallest crop on this planet, though we can cultivate it in 70% of the area of this planet. Now, it doesn't need fresh water. Let's think about this also. The only crop that doesn't need fresh water is seaweed. Of course, we can cultivate. So taking all of that into account, and the application, seaweed can be in every aspect in our life, in every aspect. It's not just food. Food one day will be the smallest component of the, the categories or the markets. There are industrial applications. Now, Mr. Houssam just mentioned, we have the Green Initiative in Saudi. It's 10 billion trees to cultivate, in addition to 40 billion trees in the Middle East. Now, let's think. This need, let's say, where the seaweeds can help. Biostimulants, let's say, fertilizers, soil restorations. Now, by the time we do this, the seaweed is also the blue, the restoration of the ecosystem, let's say, when it's required. The CO2 issue, we are very much into the CO2 issue. Saudi government have recently announced or launched various initiatives on dealing with the CO2 issue. Now, we know nothing on earth can deal positively, control the CO2 emission more than the seaweeds. It depends on how you cultivate it, where you cultivate it. In a recent study, 3-4% of the total cost of the western coast of, let's say, of US, let's say, can observe more than what the whole California, CO2 emission. Can you imagine? So the idea here is we need CO2 other than food. In this region, not many people eat seafood, okay? Sorry, not seafood, sorry, we eat seafood. Not many people eat seaweed. But if we talk about the industrial application, the need for millions of tons of biostimulants, fertilizers, millions of tons of bioplastic. The ingredients that we can use from seaweeds into plastic that make plastic degradable. I mean, this is a big issue. We have billions of tons dropped into our ocean, plastic that will last forever. Now, the solution will come from seaweed. So these are the applications that we are looking at. And I would just like to say 30 million tons, the world production of seaweed today can be the production of a medium-sized project in our near future. One project could produce as much as that. And the potentials, as we said, there are trillions of tons. One project very soon, in the next 10 years probably, will produce more than what the whole world is producing. We have not touched this yet. Let's watch it.
Excellent. Esben, I saw a smile on your face. So how you, with your tank, vertical farming, will change the paradigm of seaweed cultivation, and what will be the added value? And CAK, stay tuned, because the next question is for you about the potential of onshore aquaculture. So I'd like to understand, and I don't want absolutely to oppose the different methods of cultivation, but what will be your catch in terms of implementing this new method, and what will be the advantage of cultivating in tanks seaweed, and for what purpose?
Thank you, Pierre. So first of all, it is true that in Pure Algae, we aim to introduce a paradigm shift in the seaweed industry. And we do that by creating land-based systems that are vertically scalable. And normally, when you say how much seaweed can you produce, you measure this in mass per area. And we try to make a system where you can measure the volumes as a mass per volume or a mass per height. And what we want to focus on with this technology is not as much as delivering 30 million tons of seaweed, because that requires enormous tanks to have all these amounts. But what we do address is the opportunity to create the circumstances that Houssam mentioned in the beginning, stressing the importance of the environment, stressing that a healthy environment leads to a healthy food. And we don't have as much sun in most of Europe as there might be in India. So we can probably not compete on scale at the same moment, at the same measure. But what we can do is that we can focus on the synergies and create values between industries. So with our technology, we can actually make a fit for an already existing industry, the aquaculture sector, the land-based aquaculture sector, and allow them to have their already purified water turned into seaweed. And by using that purified water, we already have a very healthy environment. And by that, we can ensure a very healthy food. And by the vertical design, we can ensure that there will be sufficient and high amount for industrial production.
And CAK, so we've been talking about months, years, about the potential of seaweed in India, not only to feed people, but also to go up in the value chain. You're working on extracting biomolecules, you're working with our friend, Nia, on the bioplastic. So what is behind your vision of aquaculture and green seaweed aquaculture? And how do you envisage the future extension of this potential new sector in India?
Yeah, there's a fantastic question what you are asking. As all of you know that India never been like other countries where they consume the seaweeds. That is the reason why we have really lagging far behind other Asian countries in the consumption as well as the production of seaweeds are concerned. But today, there is a great targets. There is a great movement, impetus given by the government to develop this sector and emerge as one of the leading player in the seaweed sector. And strategically, especially, there are certain sectors which can lead it. Especially the agar is something, where agrophytes can be grown in India. We have the agar that can be, extracted, or the grade of agar that we get from Palladium can be produced. And Government of India has announced for the first time a special budget for developing this sector, more than 630 crores Indian rupee for next 5 years, where it would like to increase the production from today. It is around 3,000 tons. They would like to take by next 2025 maybe 1.1 million tons. No? So this kind of a targets and the kind of technology. So please remember that the downstream processing is concerned. Maybe India showed a novel, I think, directions for the whole globe, where we are first in the world to use the fresh seaweed for downstream processing. So till 2000, it is the dried seaweed that has been processed by global seaweed industry. It is the Indian scientific community that showed the processing of wet seaweed and producing the plant growth stimulant from the red seaweed called Kappa ficus. So this discovery, this innovation today really resulted in a big way to extract out as many product as possible from the biomass is concerned. No? So from technological, I think the downstream processing is concerned, we are very much, I think, advanced, and we are very confident. Where we are lagging behind is biomass production. So this is something where we have taken technologies. Growing seaweeds in the sea is definitely a best option, but that comes with some kind of a seasonal barriers, some kind of a challenges. So we are now considering as an additional option of growing seaweeds on the land as well, in addition to the growing seaweeds in the sea, right? The advantage of growing seaweeds on the land is definitely it supports the seaweed cultivation in the sea by way of providing seedlings for the farmers who are short of it during a monsoon period that disrupt the activity. There is one advantage. The second advantage, what we foresee is the new seaweed industry is going to be formulating industry. So the formulating industry requires I think a quality biomass with the active ingredients consistent. To achieve consistency, obviously the land-based technologies are the best one. So we are looking into this opportunity, and also the seaweed cultivation with the salt production and also the aquaculture sector. By the way, I just wanted to say, Houssam, the first beneficiary of the seaweed aquaculture is the fishery sector, in fact. So as you increase the production of fish, there will be some kind of I think environmental issues that can be very well tackled by the seaweed aquaculture. So that will be the first sector to benefit it. So it will be a win-win position to promote seaweed aquaculture, okay, in the whole, I think, in the global oceans are concerned. So as I said that in India, so by 2030, we are going to be #1 in the population, okay, surpassing the China as well. But the land is not proportionately going. So we have that barrier. So we need to explore the oceans for our future needs, including food and energy. So in that context, I think we need to be innovative in producing the, I think, biomass and processing the seaweeds so it becomes a sustainable.
So we understand that there is no opposition between the different type of aquaculture, and in the country, we need all type of aquaculture to successfully bring, the emergence of this industry. So my question, to Sam, which is more FAO related, is well, how can we implement a global or regional or per basin, strategy to sustainably grow this type of aquaculture, and instead of competing between land-based, vertical, offshore, nearshore, totally offshore, how can we coordinate the actions under the FAO and the regional government to make sure that we team up and push, the aquaculture to the next level?
Thank you, Jeff. Very pertinent question. I will answer as GFCM officer, because in GFCM, the General Fisheries, we are an RFMO, so we are managing fisheries and aquaculture in Mediterranean Black Sea, and we have really, we build a platform of cooperation between countries. We have 22 member countries, and the 23rd are the European Commission. So within this platform, we create a forum of discussion among countries for different dimensions, starting for the most important one, the governance, for enabling governance for seaweeds. And I think the most important thing is to be agreed among the countries, at least at the Mediterranean Black Sea, to a minimum set of and to encourage the at governance level, starting with legal framework, because in many countries, if you want to apply for a seaweed license, nobody will answer to you. It's not well known, at least in Mediterranean Black Sea. It's a new activities. So we need at country level to start and say, okay, really a priority for us because it's ecosystem services, because it's not very difficult to produce, etc., etc. And then we identify for this species, this group of species, a clear fast track to have the license, so a clear licensing process, because we have different initiatives, but few really focus on licensing process, selecting of sites. So we need to start from there. As Esben stressed, we need to identify sites at government level. We said, okay, it will be allocated to. So anyone who wants to invest in seaweed, okay, please go there, and it's easy to cultivate it. You have, for example, 20 hectares, 100 hectares. It depends with the country. It depends with the area, and also we can identify the techniques. We cannot say, okay, this techniques could not be used because maybe it's not work. We cannot have such approach. For each environment, we have a level of intensification. For each environment, we have a suitable techniques. For each environment, also we have a level, if you want, the skills that need. It depends with the skills of the locals. So what we are trying to do with our member country, at least at GFCM level, is to say, start from there, identifying together the main priorities, how we can succeed to culture seaweeds, starting with our seaweeds, the one that we have in the Med, with the site that we have, with the knowledge that we have, and let's improve. So we ask them to be open, because between the north and south of Mediterranean, a lot of possibility of cooperation, and our role is really to strengthen this cooperation. Over to you, Pierre.
I have the feeling that the timeline for a government and an international organization, the timeline is slightly different from the timeline from a small entrepreneur. And I've been following the development of Esben. He's really struggling, to get the right capital, to get the right partner, to make his way through the administration. And I would say that a similar thing, happens with Haydar, because Haydar is very well introduced at government level, but everything depends on the decision of one or two persons, and it takes time. So how can we make sure, and this is my question maybe to Esben, how can we make sure that we help you liberate, the bottlenecks that exist at every step of the development in the seaweed industry?
That's extensive. So first of all, what I believe that entrepreneurs within this sector need is really supporting the potential. Because when you look at the seaweed industry, for example, in Europe, it's a topic that has been put really a lot of effort, money, and capital and time in considering the research in it within universities, etc. But the industry in Europe is lagging behind, and that is because there is a lack of understanding. How can this potential be implemented in the industry? And there is a fear from the industry to follow that journey on the early stage. And what has helped us in this journey is that there are systematic ways to get support. The soft funding projects and other elements that can de-risk the larger capital investments are really one thing that can push forward this development, and partnerships that can also ensure that the market on all sides of the value chain is being matured has an extreme effect. We, for example, are developing a new technology. CRK, I believe that we should have a call someday, because you're looking for a stable production and a stable product. That is exactly what we can deliver. And while we have that technology to enabling that, in Europe they ask us, oh, but who is going to take the seaweed that is produced? We don't see that there are any ready pharmaceuticals for such a product yet, but yet there is a high demand on it on the market. And even though CRK might have a complete understanding of that potential and awareness, the industry that is supposed to fund this, they don't know, and they are very hard to convince. So that is kind of the troubles that we are facing, the gap between research and industry, trying to close the loop and bring potential out into reality.
Haydar, this morning we had, during the discussion, some numbers that went through the conversation, and we're talking about 150 million to develop, 200,000 hectares of organic seaweed cultivation. You've been in the sector for quite a long time. You've experienced, the reluctance of the decision maker to invest such an amount of money in seaweed. So what will be, the catalyst to make their decision different and to help them, to take, a step forward in investing massively in the seaweed industry? How can we convince both public and private funding to jump and to support massively the seaweed cultivation?
Very good question. It's simple. I just want to say it's simple. It's difficult, but simple at the same time. Start from the end. We ended up with the approach that all the stakeholders along the value chain need to be together. You can't be the R&D institution alone and the pilots, let's say, and the technology, and you need all. For example, it's for the interest of this planet. What if the off-takers, let's say, are there? What if the CO2 credit institutions, there are people in this world who are willing to buy the CO2 credit. They pay for that, right? If you have 100 million ton CO2 credit, there are off-takers for that or not? Yes, bring them in. Bring in let's say, those who need the end product. By the way, we met along the past years, many companies. You know what they say? I mean, okay, they believe in the technology, in everything, but they say the quantities produced are peanuts compared to the market of that particular segment. So they would like to see big quantity, big projects, not just small segments here and here. So if we talk, that will bring me again, industrial, large scale, fully integrated, okay? And the environmental issues need to be taken. Now, seaweed, what hurts sometimes,
you don't see the focus on seaweed at CO2. It's the best sequestration component on this earth when it comes to CO2. Why we don't use that? But that need large projects, 10 kilograms or a ton, or that doesn't make any sense. So we have developed that formula whereby we say, okay, 100 million ton of CO2 sequestration. But okay, that's one. What you will get out of that will fund you for the next 50 years. But you need to work on that. Now, I just want to jump a bit on the Esben point. Offshore, vertical, RAS, onshore are all important. Each of these have a segment. There are people who are producing Cisna, but there are people who are producing Jumbo. It doesn't mean that this will take this market or this will take this market. Let's say as a use, I'm saying. All are needed. In some countries, you cannot go offshore. In some countries, for some reasons, you don't have, let's say, fresh water. So all are needed. There is absolutely no different. Which product you want, what is the market, what is the size, and then you will decide which technology you will use. So again, my point here is when the decision makers, whoever they are government or they are the fund, let's say financial institutions, if they see your approach that it's comprehensive and you have involved all the stakeholders, it will be much easier for you. And let me say something here. Oil companies here around the world, the giants, the top 5 in the world, they are not in exploration. Tell me one oil company which is just focusing on exploration or just on, let's say, dredging, or one. You will see the top. They are from A to Z, refinery, the product, the transportation, even to gasoline station. They go and explore up to selling the final product to you. We want this model to be there within this industry in order to make it easy for others to join. Thank you.
So that means that we need to scale up dramatically fast. And that will lead me to the next question to CAK. A few times ago, you mentioned that you're not short of investors in India. That means that people have understood the potential of seaweed. And I've heard that the federal government in India is also preparing a blue bond, which means accelerating dramatically the investment into the blue economy. So in the next session, we're going to have Alexandra Cousteau talking about the initiative that she has through Ocean 2050 with Carlos Duarte, who was based in Saudi. But it's going to take at least 1 or 2 years before we get, the formula for offsetting. So can we count on voluntary decarbonization action from the large industry? Or should we really push forward to get a formula for offsetting carbon from seaweed? CO2 from using seaweed, sorry.
Yeah. Definitely, I think, we need to, seaweed is a vehicle that can be utilized for the carbon credit. At the same time, it can be even used for accelerated economic growth in those countries where the economy and the job is a crisis. So it can be smartly utilized. I think what is important is that we need to have a smart technologies. And at the same time here, since we are talking about producing in a billions of tons in a concentrated areas, maybe we require to take or adopt the new technologies, what people are talking about, digital platforms. That is something which is very critical. Maybe using that kind of knowledge where you will able to even predict the predictability and all, So basically with this kind of a new technology, and maybe trying to quantify the benefits, including the environmental benefits and CO2, I think we should be able to deal with it. And certainly, I think, to achieve, like I perfectly I think agree with what Haydar mentioning is that it is a one planet, right? We require to come together to achieve or work for a single goal. Maybe benefits can be taken, right? I don't have to go to Saudi Arabia to work on seaweeds, but I can take the knowledge from Saudi Arabia to use that knowledge to derive value and benefit the community in India. Maybe this is another very important thing. What we require in this contest is that collaborations, free exchanging the knowledge. Okay, building a new seaweed industry is possible only all the stakeholders come together and work together. I think that is something which I highly appreciated.
So we have approximately 5 minutes before we have to start, closing down. So I'd say, well, and a quick answer for each of you. How do you want to structure the partnership with the industry? Esben.
So when we need to structure partnerships with the industry, there are many ways to go for. You need to think of what does the seaweed require, and as Ada talked about, what is the value chain around it. When we make a land-based technology, we need to have input, and that is a water input with a nutrient, and that requires a synergy with Erwes or another land-based aquaculture setup. While at the same time, there must be some sort of outsourcing for the seaweed, and that is very important that there is established channels for that as well. So I think I'm losing track on the specificity of the question, but does that lead the way, Pierre? Or
Almost. That leads
Okay.
to my next question, but we're going to come back for the wrapping to you. Ada,
Right.
what will be the company you'll contact first if you want to develop your green reef barrier in Saudi?
Okay. Shall I say companies better than company? Again, it's a stakeholder issue. We are certain, we have scanned, let's say, the world technology. The technology is there. Grass, vertical, offshore. I mean, the technologies are there. The only thing is the purpose. What we want this for. That's really is important. So I will definitely go for those who can bring value, who can attract a technology partner who can attract funding, let's say. Not every technology partner would attract, let's say. I would not want to say big names because we don't have really big names yet. I mean, within the industry, I'm saying, but we have good names, by the way, reputable. So definitely there will be the technology partners who can provide not necessarily just one system. You will need 3, 4, 5 different systems on the table when you start. Okay, don't put all the eggs in one basket. Huh? You need them all, and with this diversity, you will attract the next level of partners, who will attract the next level of partners until you are done with your consortium.
So it's becoming complicated, and we need to have a private conversation so I can understand who are the stakeholders. Anyway, CAK, what will be the investor you're dreaming to attract, in the seaweed industry in India?
Fine. This is again, there is no one, I think, one word answer for this, but certainly we are driving to meet the Indian needs. Okay, the Indians who can support the definitely one is the high volume and low value products like bioplastics is the one, and definitely another is a climate driven, because we also got a committed to, I think, control the emissions, so we need to address that one. And also we wanted to really do something where we will be globally competitive. So maybe we don't mind working people in the food sector. If somebody can come with a very complementary, not a competing interest, with a complementing and with a synergetic kind of a platform, maybe food sector and chemical sector is something we'll be very happy to work.
Okay. Houssam, a more complicated question. What will be the next 3 countries where FAO is aiming to develop, this seaweed strategy and make it an operational project within 5 years?
I will respond on the behalf of GFCM because as I told you, we are the arm of FAO in the Mediterranean and Black Sea. And my answer will be quite diplomatic. So I cannot say top 3 countries, but the country who are volunteer, because it's always about voluntary. If we are speaking the same languages, if we agree on the principle, and you know that we are preparing now a workshop on principle of responsible investment. So countries who want really to jump on this concept of responsible investment for seaweed, they are more than welcome. And what is the responsibility of it? It means we are investing in sustainability. It means that we are investing on people. The social impact for us is very important. Feeding people is really very important. If you are sharing, or any countries who are sharing this vision is more than welcome to start. But then, within the GFCM country, we have this democratic approach that everything is discussed within the commission, the yearly session of the commission. And usually last year, 2 years before, we adopted 22 recommendation and resolution. It means some of them are really mandatory to the country. So when we agree on a solid basis, it's really going fast, because seaweeds have a really fantastic potential. It's healthy. There is not problem with environment, but it needs a quite good environment. It's not very expensive also for consumer. So you are producing healthy food, not really expensive. So it's really it's not miraculous species, but at least it's really near to be the perfect species compared to the others. So we are pushing our countries to discuss in a really very active way how we can develop this sector and how we can build a know-how in the region. And this is very important.
Thank you, Sam. Last question, and I ask you to answer in less than 1 minute. What do you intend to develop or to achieve before next year Seaweed Around the Clock? Esben.
So we intend to develop an automated and distance-driven system, which is independent of at-site operation, so that you can actually cultivate seaweed just simply by sitting in front of your computer and telling the system when to harvest and when to restart, so that we in Europe also can compete on productions, considering the circumstances in Europe.
So we have a date, and next year we're going to come, and look at through the video what you have achieved, and maybe in person we'll be delighted to come and see the vertical farming. Haydar, what is your commitment for next year? What are you going to achieve?
We hope that the world's first integrated industrial seaweed operation will be launched. I'm saying scale, and you will see probably people or organizations from more than 20 countries involved at all levels, and with the FAO, hopefully, with the World Bank, with all the international organizations, with the EU, and probably local governments. Hopefully, it will be launched before a year from now.
I count on you, okay? Siaki, your achievement for next year, before next year.
Basically, our target is to have a proven, replicable technology for propagating in India for economically important seaweeds is the challenge.
Excellent. And Houssam?
So we have many, to be honest. Well, which is depending of GFCM is to really raise awareness of the country within on culturing seaweeds, and also to prepare or to work on a clear legal framework for seaweed. And if you give me a second one, it will not depend only from GFCM, but also of you, Pierre. So if you agree, our commitment next year is to organize an event on seaweed together for Mediterranean and Black Sea. So,
well, it's going to be much more than Black Sea, because we have a demand in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm suggesting that we go for a sea week around the clock. That means that we're going to stop over in many, many countries, and we're going to have to demonstrate that the industry is growing in a steady way, in a sustainable way. And I'm totally on board, especially, for this. Absolutely. You can count on me. Yeah. And I have only one wish, to conclude the panel. Seaweed is driven by women. Most of the women are the hard worker, and they are in the field cultivating seaweed. Our panel doesn't reflect the reality. And I will adopt also a second resolution that is that Vincent Duméziel brought, during the panel, one of the two panels before. We're going to call it She-Weed around the clock. We need more women on board, because this is not acceptable. I like you guys, but we need more women spirit, in this new industry. Okay? Thank you so much. You've done a great job. I look forward to speaking to you soon and measuring the development for next year. I count on you. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure, Pierre.